On this edition of Independent Sources 2014, the Year in Review. Welcome to our special Year in Review edition of Independent Sources. I'm Abi Ishola. We'll begin the show with Crystal Lowe's piece on Seneca Village. The settlement was the first significant community of African American landowners in Manhattan. The village existed in the early 19th century and was located between 82nd and 89th Streets. It was eventually razed in 1857 and its identity lost with the creation of Central Park.
Central Park is one of those places that you just assume has always been there. You would never imagine that beneath the park lies the remnants of the first African American settlement in Manhattan.
It seems to have gotten its start around 1824, 1825, when we were able to uncover the first title deeds from John and Elizabeth Whitehead. They were selling off land, which we believe they bought on spec, and they, the year before they bought this land. And they started to sell land, interestingly, to African-American males and to females, which was really unusual at that time because slavery was still in existence in New York at that time.
Professor Copeland is one of the researchers who has been trying to uncover the history of the village for over a decade.
We thought that maybe this was a part of the early foundation and what was left behind.
So she partnered up with Elizabeth Blackmar and Roy Rosenzweig, authors of a book called The Park and the People, a book created to debunk some of the myths about the people who used to live in the area now called Central Park.
And when they went back to the original records and started to look more at the primary sources, they began to uncover different truths, so to speak. And a lot of the information, the documentation that they were searching for happened to be at the New York Historical Society. So that made us aware of the rich resources we had, and we were then able to sort of, with the help of those historians and our own efforts, to reconstruct the telling of this story.
Though the village was founded by African Americans, other settlers from Germany and Ireland soon followed.
When you look at the census records to sort of investigate who's living here, you see that the men are described as laborers, which is a catch-all phrase for just about anything. You had domestic workers, not necessarily working in the community of Seneca Village. It's possible that the people lived here and then traveled to the downtown areas or a little bit farther west to service some of the more wealthier residents in New York City.
The community was eventually destroyed when the city legislature passed a bill authorizing the land to be taken by the right of eminent domain.
In the past, the stories about the creation of Central Park is that, oh, there were 1,600 people that lived on the land and they just got rid of them and they just left. But that was not the case. These people fought for their land, and they filed affidavits in the state Supreme Court stating that my property, I live on this block, my property is worth, X amount of money, you only want to give me this and I can't accept it, and I'm fighting for it.
It was a fight they eventually lost.
This place was just filled with individuals whom they thought they could get rid of. It was denuded of trees and kind of swampy land. And they really couldn't develop it. They couldn't build buildings on it. They could build buildings around it, but they couldn't necessarily build buildings on it. So it made sense to create this jewel, and then the communities, the property values went up all around.
Copeland's journey to unearth the history of Seneca Village progressed when she and her colleagues took a walk along the park's great lawn on a rainy day over a decade ago.
We uncovered glassware and bone fragments and pipe fragments, and so the teachers who were so excited were just randomly, just haphazardly collecting all of these items, and I was trying to, identify where these things were coming from so that we could have, a record.
Copeland and her colleagues soon formed a partnership with the archaeology departments at City and Barnard colleges. With the help of student interns, the team conducted research that eventually led to soil sampling and X-raying of the ground under the park to determine where they would need to excavate.
We brought the objects that we found up to our friends in the archaeology department, Diana Wall, and her students in the field school, and they looked at the objects and they were very excited about the story of Seneca Village, and they wanted to somehow get involved in the project. So we sort of created an internship, and the students were coming down and helping us do some documentary research, and they were also identifying the objects that we found to see if they actually dated to the period of Seneca Village. And after a little bit of work and investigation, they determined that the majority of the pieces that we found did indeed date to that period. So that's the story. So, you know, it's a wonderful story. The story of Central Park is a great story. And I always say, as one who appreciates history, think about what's beneath your feet, because there was always something there before, particularly in New York City, where we like to build up and tear down and build up again.
20 years ago, New Yorkers were already aware of their vulnerability to terrorism. In 1993, Islamist militants launched their first attack on the World Trade Center. Still, authorities failed to see a terrorist conspiracy when several Hasidic Jews were gunned down in New York in 1994. That incident changed the course of one Brooklyn mother's life forever. Nikki Miller filed this story.
The Brooklyn Bridge, a world-famous New York landmark. Thousands of commuters use it every day and don't give it a second thought. But for Devorah Halberstam of Crown Heights, it's a painful reminder. Her son was murdered here.
Losing that first child, it's like your whole family breaks down. It's everything before and after. And things will never, ever be the same again, and they never were the same again.
Bullets tear into a van on the Brooklyn Bridge. 4 young Jewish students are hit.
20 years ago, on March 1st, 1994, a van load of 15 Chabad Lubavitch Orthodox Jewish students were gunned down on the Brooklyn Bridge by Lebanese-born immigrant and livery cab driver Rashid Baz. 4 students were shot. 16-year-old Ari Halberstam was shot in the head and died 4 days later.
As a mother, you think the thoughts of when he was laying on the ground. I've asked this so many times. Was he freezing? When they cut open his jacket, it was a frigid day that March 1st. There was ice on the ground. I still could remember the crunching of the ice under my feet when I walked into the hospital. And that's all I can think of. Was somebody holding him? Was somebody embracing him?
The shooter, Rashid Baz, was captured the following day. In his sentencing, his defense team portrayed him as suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, triggered by what had occurred in Israel a few days earlier.
In Hebron specifically at the time, a Jewish settler had walked into a mosque, killing 29 Arabs. And there were calls for revenge from that part of the world, where there would be blood will run like the rivers Jordan. And the calls for revenge were from the most moderate countries of the Middle East to the most extreme countries.
Baz was convicted of second-degree murder and 14 additional counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 141 years to life in prison. But for Halberstam, it wasn't enough.
That mother in me, it rose up and that, overtook me, where it just was, a deep sense of, I have to get justice for my son.
The case was eventually reopened.
Right here we have the updates where the Brooklyn Bridge shooting and the murder of my son is documented.
In December of 2000, the FBI finally reclassified the Brooklyn Bridge shooting as a clear act of terrorism.
It was a very important day in the history, not just for Ari again personally, but it demonstrated that, what happened to my son didn't happen to him just in a random act of violence, but it was an attack with intent, deliberate.
Halberstam's crusade has made her a legend in law enforcement circles. She has advised and trained security officials on all aspects of terrorism. In 2009, Halberstam received a Community Leadership Award from the FBI Director's Office. Despite all the accolades, she's particularly proud of her role in the creation of the Brooklyn Jewish Children's Museum, dedicated in memory of Ari.
There's more to come on our 2014 Year in Review special, so stay with us. Thanks for staying tuned. The Bangladeshi community is one of the fastest growing groups of new immigrants in New York City. Their growth is not in long-established enclaves like Queens. Instead, they're flocking to the Parkchester section of the Bronx. Gary Pierre took a ride uptown and introduced us to the two men who are the engineers of this migration.
Jackson Heights has always been the place if you're trying to find Bangladeshi sari, jewelry, and curry. While you will certainly find these things in that established Queens Bangladeshi enclave, if you hop on the number 6 train to Parkchester in the Bronx, you'll be surprised to find a burgeoning Bangladeshi community there.
When I moved first, because we are only Bangladeshi, about 6 families moved first to the Bronx. At that time was mostly, all different kind of people, black people, Chinese people, white people, and Italian old people. They mostly live in the Parkchester condo that time.
I actively involved in real estate business, and this is my subject. I found that the rainbow of people, like in Bronx, various colors, immigrants, and a lot of potential. The street and house are well equipped, and I think this is very good for living for immigrant and low-income people.
Hussein, a real estate broker, and community activist Shahid have been actively recruiting other Bangladeshis to move into the neighborhood like they did about 20 years ago. Since then, they have promoted the Bronx's lower rent as a major selling point. So far, it appears that the duo have succeeded. Not too long ago, community events needed Bangladeshis from the other boroughs to draw a crowd.
Now we don't need for Queens or Brooklyn or anybody, because whatever people, I have a Bronx, enough for my event. I can get in 5,000 people for Bronx.
It wasn't always an easy sell.
When I came this Bronx from Queens, if I go back to the Queens, my friend told me, "You crazy? We moved to the Bronx?" Well, my friend, I moved because I got a cheaper apartment over there. Oh, still, my friend, you can do the Bronx. Then I got a vision of what I got to do, how I can change the Bronx, how I can change my community and can interest in the Bronx.
The growth of the Bronx community is only part of the increasing population in the city. According to the New York City Planning Department, Bangladeshis ranks 11th among groups of foreign-born populations. From 2000 to 2011, their numbers grew from 42,000 residents to 74,000.
Partly it started with diversity visas, which were a program introduced in the early 90s to allow immigrants to come from countries that previously had very low numbers, and I guess that created the seeds of a larger immigration, because once you had some people here, they were able then to send for their family members. So the numbers and people are coming to New York looking to do better, to make more money. Many of the Bangladeshis are highly educated, not all, but some are. So I think that's what's going on.
Bangladeshi leaders are positioning the community for the next step, mainstream politics.
You really don't begin to see a big impact politically until you get a large number who are naturalized, and even more have children who've grown up, born here, grown up, and can vote. We see that for other groups, but I think we have to wait a bit for Bangladeshis. And of course, another interesting question is whether they will combine with other South Asians. You know, there are deep divisions, but you wonder, sometimes in New York it brings people together. And the question is, will they unite? Because they are still a fairly small group, you know, compared to, you know, other groups. You know, will they unite with Pakistanis, for example, with other Muslims? Most of the Bangladeshis are Muslims. Yes. Will they unite politically on some circumstances? We don't know yet.
I hope one day we're going to get a leader like Mr. Shahid. We'll have a chance to run for something for city council or like state. So hopefully we'll get something.
For Independent Sources, I'm Gary Pierre.
This next piece keeps us in the Bronx. It's a story about Muslims and Jews worshiping under the same roof. Producer Judith Escalona introduced us to the Islamic Center of North America.
This is one of the largest Muslim concentrated neighborhoods in the Bronx, actually in New York City. In this particular community, we have so far 11 mosques that have opened up in the last 15 years.
Sheikh Musa Drame immigrated to the U.S. from Gambia, West Africa, 28 years ago. He is the founder and imam of the Islamic Cultural Center of North America. The sprawling center houses a Muslim school and a mosque, and more recently, a synagogue. Leon Bleckman has lived in this Parkchester neighborhood for 75 years. He was president of the Young Israel of Parkchester synagogue that served the Orthodox Jewish community for 70 years before it closed in 2004.
We had 7 synagogues. Every synagogue had services every day, 3 times a day. And the Young Israel of Parkchester had the main synagogue, and they had 2 social halls, which they used Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for services. And they were jammed. So jammed that they had standing room only.
That was then.
Hi, Percy.
Today, a small number of elderly Jewish men and women are what remains of the once thriving Jewish community of Parkchester.
As years went by, the older people passed away, and the younger ones moved to Riverdale. They moved to Long Island. They had their own homes in Long Island. They went to Yonkers, Westchester County. They went all over. They went out of the Bronx.
A shrinking revenue base caused Young Israel of Parkchester to sell its building and move to a storefront where they renamed themselves Beis Menachem of Parkchester. Eventually, the synagogue ran out of money and faced eviction.
At that particular time, this lady, whose name is Patricia Tamasulo, who is a Catholic, I may add, approached me and said, you have a big space, and we hold our political meetings here, and I'm working with these Jewish people that just lost their synagogue and they lost their storefront, and they really now don't have place to worship, and it's very sad. I said, no problem, let them come.
He will not take money from the Jewish people. He will not take money from me. He will not take money from anyone, because he believes that this is a gift. If you have the space, why not share it?
Have a good Sabbath.
So for the past 2 years, the Orthodox Jews of Beis Menachem of Parkchester Synagogue have been praying under the same roof as the devout Muslims of the Masjid Al-Iman Mosque, a historical first many, including Bleckman, consider miraculous.
Out of this entire world, we are the only mosque and synagogue in the same building, in this entire world, including Israel. It's a miracle of God.
Miracle or not, moving the synagogue to the Islamic Center had to be approved by Jewish authorities, who found nothing in the Torah forbidding it. That cleared the way for the Brooklyn-based Chabad Lubavitchers to provide a rabbi for the Sabbath and holidays. But allowing Jews to worship in the Islamic Center caused Sheikh Musa Drame to initially lose a large part of his Muslim congregation, though eventually they returned.
In the beginning, it was the war of ideology and belief, but later on, they began to say, wait a minute, because their minds are being opened up.
The Imam sees a future of inclusion for his community growing out of a simple act of kindness and making the idea of the family of man a reality.
To me, he's like a brother. Honest to goodness brother.
Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
Our special Independent Sources 2014 Year in Review will continue in just a moment. We were fresh off the pomp and pageantry of this year's Fashion Week, and so we decided to take a look at where that industry and ethnic communities coincide. One of our pieces focused on Muslim clothing designer Naila Limas, who's trying to undo some stereotypes about Muslim women with her fashion-forward aesthetics.
We're not in this business to conform to what the existing industry is doing, other than the professional aspect and comp cards and things of that nature, but we're really in it to bring something new. And that's kind of what fashion is anyway. As long as it's professional, it's creative, it's about bringing something new.
Naila Limas is indeed bringing something new to the fashion world. Her clothing line, Amira Creations, is inspired by modest Muslim women like herself who infuse style and flair into their everyday look. Here in this Manhattan studio, Limas showcased her latest work during New York Fashion Week.
The name of the collection this season is Equanimity, which means serenity, tranquility, relaxation, anything, in that realm. And that's what I really wanted this collection to reflect. And this line is a transitional line. When I say that, I mean it transitioned from a vast variety of the definition of modesty. So it's not just modesty from my perspective as a Muslim woman, but it's just modesty for like the average modest woman who wants to, maybe show a little but still be covered, or wants to wear something fitted but maybe not fitted and short. So I tried to keep a balance within this collection to kind of meet the masses.
Why was it important for you to create fashion-forward clothing for modest Muslim women?
That's me. That's just me. Since I've been young, I've been very creative. I've been wearing a hijab and covering my hair since I was like 5 years old. And my parents were very willing to let us be creative with our hijab, which is part of the reason why I embrace it being an adult, because I had a very good experience with it when it was introduced to me as a young girl.
The Brooklyn-bred designer got her creative start dabbling in jewelry design and cosmetology. Eventually, she took interest in creating garments. Limas is also extending her hand to other designers. Amalina Aman, a fellow modest clothing designer, came all the way from Australia to showcase her work in the installation Limas produced. Talk a little bit about your collection. It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's called Enchanting Romance. It's inspired by the 1960s to the 1970s, a very bohemian, gypsy, hippie. It's like a bit of femininity, but at the same time, there's that rugged and really rustic look into it. To me, modest fashion is a very big market because I know that basically it's not only Muslim people that can wear it or Islamic people can wear it, like everyone can wear it, like anyone that wants to be very comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say that I see a lot of crossover pieces. The harem pants are beautiful.
Yeah, and like the harem pants and also like the throw over, like the kimonos and the kaftans.
Showcases like this is just one of the ways Limas is trying to impact the industry. She's received international recognition for creating the Under Wraps modeling agency that promotes modesty through the runway. Her main goal is to break down stereotypes about Muslim women spawned from the media.
It's a more of a oppressed type of way that they tend to depict us. Even as far as our garb, they tend to depict us a lot of the times with very dreary, dark clothing. And that's fine to who wants to wear it, but there's Muslims that don't dress like that, and they don't really show us like that. So I feel like we need to be seen.
Finally from us, 2014 was a World Cup year, and we tried marking the event in our own way here on the show. Sarah Pizan produced this profile of South Bronx United, a program that uses soccer to mentor young leaders and scholars.
Mamadou Junior Traoré is a 16-year-old high school student, originally from Mali. Every day after school, he comes here to the Macombs Dam field to practice soccer with South Bronx United. It's been a rough couple of years for Traoré. After his older brother went to jail 4 years ago, his parents feared the Bronx was not a safe place for him, so they sent him to live with an uncle in France. When he returned to New York last year, Traore turned all of his energy and free time to his passion.
Soccer I don't know, it's like medicine. Whenever I'm sick, it's there for me. And it just motivates me to keep on moving forward.
Traore is a forward or striker, just like his favorite player, Fernando Torres, of the English Premier League team Chelsea.
They call me Torres. That turns out to be my favorite player, and so I told everybody to call me by that name, and they just do.
Traore is among the 600 students, aged 4 through 19, that play soccer with South Bronx United, or SBU. SBU started as a small after-school soccer coaching program in 2009. Then it grew much larger because of the power of some of the South Bronx soccer-crazed immigrant community.
About 95% of the kids are from immigrant families, and almost half of them themselves were born outside the country. Second, they're able to walk. They're getting a soccer ball at their feet. There was no program in the South Bronx for them to play, no team for them to be a part of that would get them out of the community, give them a chance to travel, and potentially use soccer for a way to get into high school or college or even beyond that.
It's hard for teenagers like Traore to get out of the Bronx. The area is the poorest congressional district in the United States, and statistics show that nearly half of high school students drop out before graduating. With that in mind, So leveraged a football-fascinated community interest in the sport to attract students to the program.
Whether it's after-school tutoring for high school students, that's college prep, SAT prep, and then we have a social worker on staff that works with kids and their families around whatever issues that might come up. And we have a staff that also supports a number of kids around immigration issues.
The club has become so much more than an after-school program for students like Traore.
My teammates here, whenever we're going through down stress and stuff, like I motivate them to move on forward. They have problems, they come tell me about it.
Traore is a 10th grader at the Bronx High School of Business. His priority is passing the upcoming Regents exam so that he can go off to college and become a psychologist. So's been one of Traore's biggest supporters, pushing him towards that goal. His #1 mission has always been to plant the college seed in underprivileged children in a community like the South Bronx.
And we have kids that, when they join in middle school or in 9th grade, would never have thought they'd be going to college. They had no role models at home. They'd be the first ones in their family to go to college. But after reaching junior year, they are assuming they're going to college. Yeah, it's a big shift for sure.
For the past 5 years, all of the children participating in SBU have graduated high school. 94% of them have gone off to college. That success has caught the eye of Major League Soccer clubs. In April, SBU was named the youth affiliate of the NYCFC, the newest professional football club taking the pitch in New York.
And what that means is a lot of our kids and coaches are going to have access to clinics and camps and trainings, and perhaps have the opportunity to watch the professional team or the academy play soccer and learn from them, and may potentially lead down the line, who knows, to one of the kids from the South Bronx having the opportunity to play with a youth academy from New York City FC, and who knows, maybe down the line get out on the professional field with a professional team.
As the students practice and play in the shadows of Yankee Stadium, Traore hopes that one day soccer will overshadow baseball as the borough's iconic sport.
I think it could potentially. I hope it can have a voice for the Bronx. But as we speak right now, it's baseball.
For Independent Sources, I'm Sarah Pizon.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Join us in the new year for more stories from the city's ethnic and immigrant communities. Till next time, be independent-minded.